Hey, welcome to WACTS. This is episode 4. We're covering February 1st to February 9th, a little bit longer week because I wanted to talk about Better Call Saul, the first episode and the second episode, so guess what? That's going to be part of this episode. And I also want to talk a little bit about Parenthood, a new show Liz and I started watching. Also, I have an interview, very first interview in what will be a long series of interviews, I'm sure, with my friend Danton Spina, who just wrapped up a project called Every Week for a Year. It's a 52-week project covering, guess what, an entire year, where he was doing one project a week, and we talked a little bit about that. I helped him finish up the last project of the year last night, where we took an old video he made in 2001, stop-motion Lego, and we cut it up and moved it around and added some sound. It's really great. I don't think it'll be ready in the next couple days, but I do want to show it to you guys, so I'll post it on my site as well. Sorry if I'm a little tired. I shoveled the porch today. Well, I didn't just shovel. I also used a snowblower for the first time. I never had a snowblower growing up. It was always a shovel. Very exciting to use a snowblower. I give snowblowers 5 stars with a confidence rating of 5, but I'm a little bit exhausted, so... And finally, this week, I'm going to talk a little bit about what this week was like transferring some of the knowledge I gained from the Global Game Jam a couple weeks ago to making a couple models for my boss. She's over in London now and going to be doing a presentation soon, and I just want to talk a little bit about what that process was like and how cool that transmogrification of skills are. Yay, it went really well. Spoiler alert. So okay, let's get right to it. Television. Okay, just watched the first 2 episodes of Better Call Saul. I was a huge Breaking Bad fan. I made so many videos during that show's run, just kind of expressing how passionate I was about it. Better Call Saul, I actually, honestly, I've been looking forward to it. I haven't been, like, crazy hyped up about it. Spin-off shows, things like Caprica, The Lone Gunman, Millennium, don't do that great and usually aren't, they're pale shadows to the show that they were originally based on. So, again, I kind of had the show in the back of my head. I was looking forward to it, but it's so much better than I actually expected it to be. In retrospect, I should have known better. You know, this show has so much of the original crew that Breaking Bad did, the cinematographers, directors, Michelle MacLaren, people like that, Vince Gilligan, Peter Gould, a lot of the writer's room, Kelly Dixon's editing things. You know, it's still Albuquerque, it's a lot of the original cast members, or, you know, a few. But everything about it is, it feels so much in that Breaking Bad universe. No shortcuts are taken. There's a real sense of patience here. And the show does a great job right in that pilot episode of reminding you, like, yes, you know what, this is part of the Breaking Bad universe. The first 10 minutes had me giggling like a maniac. It was so great. And I don't want to spoil anything in here, so I'm speaking in weird generalities, but the way that it establishes its own world, like this is its own story, it's a little bit lighter in tone, but it is within that Breaking Bad universe. It's set in that kind of way with that tone, a similar tone with a storytelling style that very clearly will lead into Breaking Bad. The first episode I thought was perfect. A fantastic pilot, did everything I wanted it to, and the second episode I think was doing really well through the first half or so. Then after the big montage, I think there's a bit of a pacing issue, so that felt a little bit jarring, but still it's telling a great story. I can't wait to see where it goes. I'm confident that just like Breaking Bad, once this first season's over, the whole season will just play as a fantastic binge watch, and whenever the show's over, guess what? I bet the entire series will also be a fantastic binge watch. So thank you, AMC, for giving the show a chance. It's interesting knowing that Saul is going to be, or Jimmy McGill as he's known now, is going to eventually just become a little bit seedier, which in some ways is not as ginormous a career trajectory as we know Walter White has over the course of the show, but I still think there's a lot of great room here to play. There's a lot of room to tell some great stories. The second episode picked up right where the first episode left off. I'm curious if this show is going to have as much verisimilitude as Breaking Bad did, if it's going to, you know, cover that same small period of time. Although in the second episode, there's a montage that, for all we know, covers 6 months. And oh man, it was so great to have Michelle MacLaren back there. She's such a fantastic director. Everything she does with Game of Thrones, she's doing Wonder Woman now. So great. So all I'm going to say is, after the first 2 episodes, I am so psyched for the show. I'll say this. It doesn't have the same emotional pull. Like, I haven't wept at all. This show's definitely lighter. There's a little bit more humor. It's still dark, but, you know, Bob Odenkirk's fantastic. I'm going to talk a little bit about it every week. I'm really enjoying this so far. Better Call Saul, I'm going to give it 4 stars with a confidence of 2. So my wife and I just started watching Parenthood. It's a show I'd heard a lot about over the years, and they just had their series finale, and all I know about it is people seem to really like it, so that gives me hope moving forward with something. There's shows like Sons of Anarchy that did not have a very well-received series finale, and I watched a lot of that show and then kind of dropped off after the last couple characters that I really cared about died. And so I was like, well, if the series finale is really good, then I'll catch back up. But I probably am not going to now, based on what I've heard. Sorry, Kurt Sutter. Parenthood, on the other hand, sounds like people really liked it. It seems like a good background show, and that turned out to be the case. My wife and I have probably seen 10 or 11 episodes now. Usually I have it playing when I'm working on other things, doing work. Again, this week I was doing a lot for my boss for a project in London, and so I was working on that at home while Parenthood was playing, and it works really well in the background. Something kind of interesting about it, though, it has an extra poignancy for me because both my wife and I really loved 6 Feet Under. That was like the first show that we watched together and really bonded over how real these characters were and what a fully realized world that was. Alan Ball just did such an incredible job forming those characters, the style, the tone of that show, and Peter Krause, who plays Nate Fisher in 6 Feet Under, also is in Parenthood. And what's interesting is it's his story in 6 Feet Under is so tragic, and in Parenthood, it's much less tragic. He's kind of a similar character in that he's kind of the older brother that all the other adults look up to within that family relationship. And because the story was so tragic in 6 Feet Under, there's something kind of like, oh, he's okay in this one. Like everything's gonna be fine. In 6 Feet Under, Nate Fisher had kind of a Job quality to him where he was just constantly being put upon and terrible things were always happening to him. And it's really refreshing to kind of be like, oh, it's okay. Like the worst things you have to deal with right now are, what kind of bra your daughter's wearing and stuff like that. So, the show isn't like crazy, deep, intense drama, but the characters are very real. They're very fun. you enjoy them. The little day-to-day plights they have they're very slice of life. Like nothing about it is totally out of left field. For people that like drama, this probably isn't the show for you, but as a light background thing, I think it's a lot of fun. So I recommend it, but that's only after 10 or so episodes, so I'll let you know how I feel later. For now, I give Parenthood 4 stars with a confidence rating of 2. One thing that's kind of interesting is, without spoiling anything about 6 Feet Under, is there's a scene toward the end of the series where Nate, Peter Krause's character, is having a dream where his brother, Michael C. Hall, who later went on to play Dexter and Hedwig on Broadway, that's something different, he's having this weird lucid dream experience, and so he's imagining his brother, who's gay. This is David, and he's very uptight, and he's imagining him as this very relaxed surfer dude, and they're in the back of a van and hey man, what's going on? They're passing a joint around. And what's interesting is, so then in Parenthood, it works as this kind of transition thing, because then his brother, Dax Shepard in Parenthood, is very much that character that Michael C. Hall was playing for just that dream sequence. So that's kind of cool.
Virtual reality. Architecture.
As you might recall, last week I was expressing some wonderment about what the skills that I learned over a very, very compressed time frame for the Global Game Jam would translate to this week, where over a very compressed time frame, not 48 hours, but a week, I needed to generate a 3D model and then make it a VR model that would work on a phone for my boss for his trip to London for a project we're doing there. I've been working on this kind of VR thing for my office for a little while, but this was the first time where, without me being involved at all, my boss wanted to be able to take a model and just, be able to present it and make that a real focal point of a design discussion. So, no pressure at all. And the fact of the matter is, I'll just say that it actually worked out really well. There were scripts that we used in the Global Game Jam that I was literally able to just copy and paste into this new model and change a little bit of text or whatever, and then it worked great. For example, one of the things that we added, or that I added to our original model after the original 48 hours were over, that we wanted was the radio station to be able to change to different channels. So we had Space NPR, the main radio, some music from me, some music that my brother Matt composes, which is really cool. So I created a list that was a cycling list of radio stations, a lot of else-if statements that allowed you to cycle through all these different options in a way that's a little bit different from any kind of cycling or toggling I've done in the past. And I used strings instead of integers, and that was all very interesting code talk. But I was able to take that actual script and then use that in this model, because in this example we wanted to be able to cycle through column options. On a similar note, I needed to have a way to make the design change, because we were looking at different design options, and actually the idea that we had in the Global Game Jam for raycasting, for being able to look at something and have it glow and then clicking on it and having it change, that worked perfectly for this. Again, one of the constraints of VR is that you really just have one button, and so you can have that one button do something, just one thing, or you can have that button react contextually based on what you're looking at. So you could have a GUI interface, but I actually find it much more intuitive for people, especially people not familiar with VR, to be able to just look at an actual object and then have that object, respond in some way to let you know that something's going to happen if you click, and then you click and then it happens. So that's exactly what we were doing for the VR game. We had it so that there were buttons around the ship, and you look at a button and then it glows a little bit to let you know you can interact with it, then you click and something happens. So again, I took that script, modified it to suit our needs, and the things that were interactive in this model was cycling different column options. We had columns at the apex of the theater, columns one row back. Then we had, a couple different schemes that use that in different ways because different columns were missing. And then we also wanted to show what it looked like for no columns. And then I had some fun scripting a way to have the columns be gone, but then if you hovered over the right spot, then you'd see something flashing that would let you know you could turn them back on. In addition, I wanted to be able to make it so that we could cycle through different schemes. So that was kind of a similar script to the column changes. And I just needed something you could click on that would be big and that you wouldn't click on by accident. So I made it the ceiling. And then finally, and this is great because we're totally going to use this for all of our models now, I had it so you could look at any seat in the entire theater, whether it's a person sitting down or an actual performer on stage. And if you look at them, they flash and glow a little bit. And then you click, and then you actually go right to that seat. And that was really fantastic. In the past, I'd always had our seat views scripted. So you'd press the button, and then you would just go to the next seat, the next seat, the next seat, all these seats that we had already planned out. And this is much more intuitive, because I think when you're in a space like this, you're looking around the room and you're thinking oh, well, what's the seat going to be like from over there? And so to be able to look at that seat and then just jump there and then you get that view, that's really intuitive, and I'm really proud of how all that turned out. So there you go. Video games, architecture, VR, it all works together. One final thing related to this project, unrelated to what we were doing for the Global Game Jam, is I finally started to figure out how Chromecast works. I'd used the app that works in Google Chrome that will let you project whatever is in your browser onto a screen, but I never actually played with this very cool, pretty new option that lets you project what's on a phone onto a screen, and that was perfect for what we're doing because, if someone has these VR goggles on and they're looking around a room and they're like, oh, what am I looking at right now? You'd have to be like, oh, I don't know, give it to me, and then you have to get the angle right, and that's kind of tricky. So for a presentation, it's actually really nice that we're able to set up Chromecast in such a way so that someone can be looking at the VR stuff and whatever they are seeing will be projected on a nearby screen wirelessly, which is great because when people are spinning around, you don't want them getting tangled in cords. There's a benefit over the Oculus Rift, et cetera, et cetera. So Chromecast, that's kind of a useful thing. Check it out. I want to be careful about NDCs and all that, but I figure if I'm pretty far away, I just want to show a little bit about how this is working. So this is a non-VR version of the model that I made. Again, I have this thing where you kind of align to make sure that everything's not upside down. So that's kind of useful. And then once anyone clicks, the model loads. Ideally, I'd like to have it so that it's already loading in the background. I don't think that would be that complicated. I just haven't figured out how to do it yet. And then once the model loads, you're in a theater. It's kind of Shakespearean style. And then whenever the center of the screen, so wherever you're looking, is highlighting over something, that thing will flash yellow. And so, for example, if I wanted to go to a seat, oh, that seat's flashing yellow, so you jump to that seat. Right now you're seeing the columns are off, but if you're looking at a spot where the columns could be, then it starts to flash, and then clicking turns columns on, or in this case is what just happened. Not only was a column flashing, but there was also a seat that was being highlighted, so you jump to that seat. Would probably also, by the way, be useful to have a script that makes it so that you can't be detecting two different flashy things at the same time. But again, useful to be able to go from seat to seat, see what those views make. Again, we have different columns, and then looking up at the ceiling, clicking there, cycles the two different design options. So there's a little preview. That's probably all I can show you, but pretty cool. I'm really happy with how everything turned out. Podcasts. Things I recommend from this week. Mark Maron talking to Paul Thomas Anderson, very cool interview. They cover every single one of his movies, and it's actually really great to hear PTA's takes on all of them, because they're all very mind-bending sort of films. Nerdist interview with Sam Raimi, director of the original Spider-Mans and Evil Dead and all that kind of stuff. He's a really cool guy, and he talks a lot about growing plants and crazy stuff like that. It's really fun. Product. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Barnes & Noble. They have been so kind to me over the past few years. A couple years ago, I got a Nook Simple Touch, an e-reader, which I have absolutely loved. I also have a Kindle e-reader. I forget what it's called right now, but I got that for my wife. And that to me just always felt a little bit frustrating because it's all button-based, there's nothing touchscreen-based. And the Nook Simple Touch has always had different options, which was great for when I used to ride the subway. Depending on what kind of weird position you were in, you could click a button or touch the screen and everything worked really well. And that was great. Unfortunately, it had a tendency to die, I think because I was using it so much. And Barnes & Noble has always been great about replacing it. So I actually went through 4 or 5 of them each time I'd bring it in, and I'd pay the $10, $15 for an extended warranty that allowed it to be replaced in different situations. Because one time it was totally my fault, like it got crushed in my bag when I was riding my city back to work, and that was crazy. So anyway, they've continued to replace it, and I've probably spent a total of $45 over 3 or 4 years going through all these different Nooks. Totally worth it. Anyway, this week I brought in my most recent one, which is the button stopped working for some reason, and they said, oh, you know what, actually this is totally the fault of the Nook, like the battery was swelling, and instead of just replacing me with a new Nook Simple Touch this time, they actually upgraded me to the Nook Simple Touch Glowlight, which in addition to having a pretty little glow lighty thing, great for reading when my wife is sleeping and I just still want to keep reading. It's also just a very sleek design, like it's a little thinner than the previous Simple Touch. It has these nice kind of rubber edges, which are just very pleasing and tactile and that kind of thing. So I just wanted to say thanks, Barnes & Noble, and I totally recommend the Nook Simple Touch with Glowlight. In Elizabeth's Book Corner, this week she recommends The Antelope Wife by Louise Erdrich. Things from this week I don't recommend. Shoveling large amounts of snow by yourself without a snowblower. Get a snowblower! Ben & Jerry's Banana Frozen Yogurt. Blech! It's gross. And now I am thrilled to present the first in a 1058-part interview series. Alex Coulombe talks to people. First up, Danton Spina. Architect, designer, master extraordinaire. Enjoy. Hi there, welcome to the first WACTS interview series thing. We're going to be interviewing Danton Spina about his project this year. It was called Every Week for a Year, where over the course of the year, every week he was working on a new project and tried to complete it just in what time he could muster in that week, little hour chunks, lunch breaks and things like that. And it's finally over. We finished the last one last night, kind of, and we're just going to hear a little bit about what that was like. So first question, Danton, why did you decide to do this?
I decided to do this because I wanted to force myself to get projects done that I've been wanting to do for a long time. And even though I have very little readership on my blog, it makes me feel accountable and I get all these things done that I've been wanting to get done. 52 projects now. How
many of the 52 projects were already projects that were on your plate before the whole project started? And project?
Project. I would say there were probably like 40 that were already on the list that have been accumulating year after year, and I was feeling like I never had time to work on them. And then I started chipping away at it, and I needed to get more projects to fill a year.
So were any of the projects things that you thought might end, were they all things you were super excited about, or were some of them things where you're like, I should really learn how to do this, it's going to be a bit of a chore, but then you just kind of worked through it?
Yeah, there were definitely a handful where it's a chore, but I wanted to learn Ruby, for example, so I made that one of them.
It's a scripting language.
Or Adobe Audition. I hadn't really used that software before.
It's for sound editing.
Adobe Premiere.
That's for video editing.
Video editing. Magic. So all those kind of things. I try to force myself into a corner. It makes you work a little bit harder and just figure stuff out on your own.
Did you have a favorite project?
Oh, I actually am going to release this list in the next week.
Oh, cool.
I'm still trying to compile it. But off the top of my head, I think actually our Germany trip, I ended up making one of our projects.
We went to Germany together.
Yeah. We had this cool, fun design competition. It was 72 hours, so it was a lot more than 7 hours, which is what most of my projects are. But it was a lot of fun, really cool results, and quick turnaround.
What about projects that you thought were going to be boring, but actually ended up being really exciting? Were there any like that, where you thought it was going to be a slog, and then you kind of got into it and was like, oh, actually, I'm digging this?
Yeah, some of the really simple projects, just like writing a couple plays, even early on, where I was just like, this is going to be painful. And then before I knew it, I was just going nuts during every lunch break and writing all sorts of stuff. And I had a very coherent play at the end. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, this is pretty cool.
Yeah. So are there some, obviously, because you're constraining everything to week-long chunks, some projects you could only really get started with, like he started working on like a Firefly spec script, which was really cool, and we started collaborating on that, and it would be cool to continue on that. Yeah. Are there other projects like that you think would be really exciting now that you have a little bit more leeway, that you want to go back and kind of work on more?
Yes, definitely. I have, in this next coming weeks, I'm taking a short hiatus from year 1 of my project into year 2, which I can talk about in a minute. But basically, I'm going to use that interstitial time to do some competition deadlines and go back and touch up. It's a lot of writing deadlines, plays, some prose, short stories, and one eyeglass design competition, and a few other random things. Yeah.
What's the eyeglass design competition?
I can't remember all the details. I think the company's called OCP. It's like a German company, and just to design cool new eyewear, and it has to follow certain guidelines. I was working on that as one of my projects, but it was barely like out of the concept phase when I finished after the 7 hours.
Very cool. Why don't you tell our lovely audience what your pyramid scheme is for this
My pyramid scheme.
All these projects.
So my goal is, this year was 52 projects, which is one every week. So I basically spent 7 hours on each project, though I very often went over the 7 hours. But yeah, the goal is each year I will build towards a bigger and bigger project. So this next year I'm doing one every month. So I'll still post every week for a year, but it'll be like a segment, like 4 weeks, the 1 month project. And then, so that'll be 12 for an entire year. And then the next year, I'm going to do one every quarter or 3 months. So it'll be 4 for the whole year. And then the final one, if for some reason I have something that can do this, it'll be 1 year-long project.
Right, if it's something you're really passionate about and you think could sustain your interest that long. So give us an example of the kind of project you might tackle over the coming year that seems like it would have been too intense a project for 1 week, but maybe,
Yeah, well, a lot of them spawned, I would say about half, maybe a little more even, came out of this year, where it was something that I really loved and I've been thinking about for a while, wanted to work on, but it was definitely not a 7-hour project and needs more time. I have a documentary / film that I've been working on for a while about Huntington's disease. It's very close to my heart, and I just want to really work a lot of that out, get the script really polished, and so I think that needs more attention than just 1 week, and then done. And I have a animated series that I want to work on called Good Cop, Bear Cop, which Alex has been working on also, and I worked on the sprites for the characters. I want to develop a lot of that. I want to develop backgrounds. I want to work on scripts and all that kind of stuff. And then, there's a handful of new stuff where I just want to, again, force myself to work on something that might be a little bit more interesting. But I definitely whittled out a lot of things that I know I don't like, or maybe not that I don't like them, but they're very clearly a 1 week project. Sure. And then it's done.
Yeah. The blog is?
everyweekforayear.com. It'll be down there.
Yeah. Is it like .tumblr? It's just .com.
everyweekforayear.com. Pretty straightforward.
Very simple. It's a great blog. Check it out. He did great detail about everything. There's pictures. It's everything from sketches to coding to software to woodworking projects.
You can sort by type, by week, all sorts of stuff.
He organized it very, very well. It's something to behold. Great.
Thank you.
That's it for this week. Quick shout out. I want to say thank you to Alexa Antelope and her husband Nicholas Kaufman. They are the first people to buy the Deluxe edition of Terra, a game designed by Daniel King of Reluctant Pirate Games and myself, that I kind of spruced up with some crazy deluxe elements with artwork from Alice Blank, and they had their first game session playing with it with some of their friends this weekend, and it looks like it went really well. They're posting about it on Twitter, so thanks to them. World premiere playtest. Check it out. The game looks beautiful. Thanks to Danton Spina for stopping by for the interview. Him and his wife were up for this weekend. We had a great time tromping through the snow and all that. I give hiking in the snow 5 stars, confidence of 5. Videos this week. Here's a video that gets me a lot of vitriol online for some reason. I made it for a structures class. Danton was involved with it, as were a couple other friends, where we were presenting about bending moments, which is a thing in structures, and people hate this video. They hate it so much, and I don't understand why. It's just kind of a silly video. I imagine that these are like engineering students that are up at 5 a.m. trying to figure out how bending moments work, and they're like, oh, I'm not ready for this test, and maybe this will help, and then they watch it, and then it doesn't help, and they're like, I hope you get hit by a bus! That's actually a real comment there, so that's weird. And kind of a weird video, but here's a trailer for La Salle that I put together when I was bundling the DVD version of this play with The Public Affair, which was my second play. For some reason I had a lot of fun putting together the DVDs for those shows. Little preview of what's to come over the next couple months. At some point I'm going to be making like a master edition version of La Salle, which is my first play. Obviously it's not that incredible, but there's a big nostalgic factor, and I think everyone involved in this high school production had a lot of fun. So I'm going to be putting together like the definitive version of that, and this is just a trailer that I put together talking about the play. So check that out. Thanks everyone for watching. If you have any questions, comments, let me know below, and I'll see you next week. No, that was way too calm. I'll see you next week.